just wait. Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. Here we are at the book club with another interesting book. And this one is called Funny in Farsi. I can see a rather entertaining hour ahead. And I'm very eager to see, what is going to be said about the Farsi language and so on. And we have Vispi Balaporia to tell you about the book and to share, some other like information, interviews, and so on about the author, which will make things clear. Now, Vispi has had a long career teaching literature. She is the head of the Asiatic Library in Bombay. She is quite a personage, and we are very proud that she is our member. So, Wispy, um, I'm handing the mic over to you. Go on.
I thoroughly enjoyed this book, which actually very interesting to hear her speak. Um,
Mhm.
she's she's very good in conveying her views and talking about things. And I I would like you to quickly listen to these, and I may just stop it at some point so that we
Mhm.
can go back to the book itself, because I want to point out certain excerpts and comments, and please join me in that. Those of you who have read and enjoyed the book.
Mhm.
Feroozeh Dumas was born in Abadan, Iran, and when she was 7, her family moved to California, and they spent time moving back and forth between California and Iran and then settled here. She grew up listening to her father, a former Fulbright scholar, talk about all the stories from his life. And in 2001, with no prior experience as a writer, she decided to write her stories as a gift for her children. Random House published those stories in 2003, Funny in Farsi. It was on the New York Times, San Francisco Chronicle, and Los Angeles Times bestseller lists. It was a finalist for the PEN USA Award in 2004. It was a finalist in 2005 for the Audie Award for Best Audiobook. Bob Dylan won. She was a finalist for the prestigious Thurber Prize for American Humor, the first Middle Eastern woman ever to receive this honor. She lost to Jon Stewart. In 2008, she published a second account or a second set of stories, Laughing Without an Accent. And in 2016, she published her first book of middle grade fiction, It Ain't So Awful Falafel. Her work has received high praise from readers of all ages. And we're really excited because we have one of my celebrities. Are there any, does anybody, probably nobody in this room listens to Cap Radio, right? No, nobody in this room, right? I imagine you're among friends, Pamela.
Good evening, everyone. We're very, very excited to have Feroozeh Dumas with us this evening. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for being with us. We're talking about immigration tonight. And Feroozeh, you have a great guide in the back of your book to help readers foster discussion with others about various topics, including immigration. And we're actually going to use a few of those questions tonight. First of all, what inspired you to write stories for your kids, which ultimately turned into the book Funny in Farsi?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to everybody for coming tonight, and thank you to the library and all the various friends groups that made this happen. So thank you for that. What inspired me was I grew up with a father who's a storyteller. And he told me so many stories about his childhood that I felt like if I could go back in time, I would recognize his school and his friends and the street he lived on. And I realized when I grew up that I wanted my children to have the same knowledge about my childhood. But I decided to join a writers group. And I think the reason for that was I had been a stay-at-home mom for 8 years, and I didn't have a babysitter or family in the area. So when I say 8 years, I intend to ever write a book. I just wanted to tell a few stories for my kids.
What a great result, though. For a lot of your readers, I imagine that it's their first look first inside look at an Iranian family. And so I'm wondering if you received a lot of feedback to that effect, like, oh, I read your book and I feel like I've learned so much about people from Iran.
Well, the two feedbacks, the two most common comments I guess I've gotten is, one is people often tell me that I never thought that I would read a book written by an Iranian woman and laugh out loud. Because as you know, we are not known for humor.
It says funny right on the cover.
Well, it says Greenland on Greenland, it's not green. But
Touche.
I always say that I sort of owe a huge thank you to all the Iranian politicians, because they have set that humor bar so low that pretty much all I have to do is walk in and say hello, and people say, wow, she is funny.
It's like aim for the middle.
And the other comment I get is Iranians often say to me, why do non-Iranians think your book is funny? And the truth is that by far a vast majority of my readers are not Iranian, and that there's just universal truth to the family experience. So it's not really, even though it's about an Iranian family, I have had people of every ethnicity tell me that it reminds me so much of their own families. And we all have a weird uncle. This now has been scientifically proven.
That's universal. Did you, trying to figure out how to phrase this, did you mean for it to be funny? Was it funny by accident?
It was definitely funny by accident. In fact, when the first story that I ever wrote in the writers group, which is actually in the book, was about the first time I went to summer camp. And in real life, that had actually been such a difficult experience that I went to camp and I did not talk about it for 30 years. It was like PTSD. I just put it way, way in the back of my mind. And the reason I wrote that story is I was talking to my husband one night, who was from France. He's also an immigrant. And I told him what happened was I was 12 years old, and I heard all the kids at school talking about camp. And I didn't know what it was, but I went home and I told my father that I wanted to go to camp. And my unrealistic view of America. And he used to always say to me when I was growing up, whatever American kids are doing, you should try it. And I used to say, no, I am not doing this. So when I did go home when I was 12 and I announced that I want to go to camp, my father said, fantastic. If American kids are going to whatever camp is, you should go too. So he went to my brother Farsi, who is 7 years older than I am, and said, find your sister the camp. And my brother, I think, took his revenge out on me because he found something that was 8 hours away for 2 weeks. I think had there been something in Siberia, I may have gone there. But so next thing I knew, I was on a bus going up to the mountains. And the minute I was on the bus, it was like, man, this doesn't feel right. But too late. So, 8 hours later, I arrive at this lodge. It's a 2-story lodge. There's nothing but trees all around it. And everyone is there with a friend except me. And when they were giving us a tour, the upstairs was for girls and the downstairs was for boys. And when we got to the bathrooms, there was something I'd never seen before. So instead of just having regular showers, they just had a row of shower heads. And I remember thinking, wait, did they forget to build the rest? Because there's no walls, there's no door. But I was so shy, and I thought, okay, I'm just not gonna bathe while I'm at camp. So I didn't bathe for 2 weeks. I also made no friends at camp. And I later put those two facts together.
Right,
but
were they related?
So the point of tonight is really not immigration, it's about hygiene. You should bathe. So I was telling this story to my husband one night, and he was literally crying. He was laughing so hard. And I said, this isn't funny. You're actually being very insensitive. And he said, no, this is the funniest story I ever heard. So that was the story that I wrote. And I was really shocked that it did turn out to be funny. Because I kid you not, when I went to camp, I came home, I never spoke of it. Until now.
They're still giggling. You're all being very insensitive.
Yeah.
You mentioned some universal experiences, and so many tales in the book in some ways felt familiar to me, as I imagine they felt familiar to a lot of the readers and people in the audience tonight. My parents immigrated to the US from Taiwan, and they landed in Berkeley in the late 60s, and you can imagine what culture shock that was like. Your stories managed to be uniquely your own, but also in some small ways universal to that immigrant experience. So I wonder what the reaction has been from your readers who are immigrants or children of immigrants.
Actually, the reaction of readers has been overwhelmingly positive. And actually, people feel really relieved that what I'm sharing are just personal stories. Because so often when we're talking about immigration, we talk about it in such dry, boring terms, and we're talking about numbers and facts, and we forget that these are just real people. And so I actually get a lot of people from all countries saying, thank you, you've actually inspired me to write my own stories. And the truth is, in the back of the book, I say that most people write a book after they've achieved something. Like they've climbed a mountain or they've won an award. I just skipped that part, and I just wrote about being an immigrant. And so I think, I've always said this, that everybody has a story, and everybody's story counts. And every one of you in this room has at least one amazing true story to tell. And I hope you have a chance to tell it.
You mentioned receiving feedback from readers in different countries. Is your book available in other languages, and is it available in Farsi?
Oh, sensitive topic. It is available in Iran, but okay, this is going to be a long answer. So Iran is not part of the international copyright laws. Surprise! Actually, what they say is copyright means I have the right to copy your book. Okay, so
It's very literal.
yeah. So anyway, Funny in Farsi was actually translated with my permission, and I worked with the translator, and then it went through the Censors Bureau, and it was published, and it did much better than the government thought it was going to do. So then it got banned, and then so now it's actually, the version that's available now has been censored so many times. And like the latest complaint they had, well, there were so many complaints the government had about it. But for example, there's a part of the book where I say, in my next life, I hope to be Swedish, because we all want that. And they said, well, no, in Islam, you only get one life. So, it's ridiculous. Or, the latest complaint they had was I described my uncle as being hairy, which he is. He's like the missing link. And they said, no, this is an insult to Iranian men. So, just ridiculous things. So I think whatever version exists now has been completely removed of any flavor. So don't buy it. And then the other books, they're translated without my permission. They're horrible. Don't buy those. And so then my books are also available in Indonesia. I know. Go figure. That's it. So if you guys know the leaders of any countries, please have them call me, because I would like to see it in other countries, except the problem is the humor is so uniquely American, it's really hard to translate. And even things like, how many of you remember Shake and Bake? How do you describe Shake and Bake? Because it's, you put the drumstick in the bag and then you shake it, and it's so American. Or the whole Price is Right phenomenon when somebody's saying, Louis, come on down.
Right.
It's just, you have to have seen the show and understood the hysteria. So you can't translate. And my, one last story, my translator would translate the stories and then send them to me. And there was one story where I was talking about Santa Claus, and I said, the bearded fellow coming down the chimney. So my translator literally wrote, the bearded fellow coming down the chimney. And when I read it in Persian, I said, you know what? The bearded fellow in Iran, that's a scary thought, like children, go to sleep. Khomeini will come down the chimney. That's not good. No.
I was really moved by how much kindness your family experienced. From your American neighbors, when you were a schoolgirl, you wrote that you were subjected to an avalanche of kindness. From classmates who shared their American snacks with you, to neighborhood moms who would let you play with their kids and have a sleepover. And you had family members who did not experience that same kind of kindness due to the timing of their arriving here after the Iranian Revolution. Will you compare and contrast those experiences for us?
Well, I came here in 1972, and 1972, just to tell you how different it was, in the 2 years that we lived here, between 72 and 74, we ran into another Iranian once. And it was at the mall. Because, if you want to see animals, you go to the zoo. If you want to see Iranians, you go to the mall. And, we were so shocked. And we went up to them and we said, Shuma Irani hastid? Are you Iranian? And they were, but they were very chic. They were just traveling through. And so, but nonetheless, we had them over the following weekend. It was a very exciting event in our lives. And it's funny, I have no idea who they were. I always wish I could find them now. But, so, the Americans that we met had never heard of Iran. 1972, you said you were from Iran, and people just either imagined nothing or they imagined camels. And I had only seen a camel once in the zoo, so it was a huge disappointment. But the point was that people were just kind to us. You know, they didn't really know what to do. So they just included us. And, you know, I remember my second grade teacher invited us to her house for dinner. And it was the first invitation we had by an American. And to thank them, we took this like substantial gold bracelet, because that's what you do when you're Iranian. And, you know, whenever people invite us, we give them like a little Persian rug. Or you guys should invite Iranians, I'm telling you. It's a good investment. But they invited us to their house, and her husband was a hunter. And when we went in their house, they had animal heads all over the walls, and I'd never seen such a thing, neither had my parents. And so then we sat down for dinner, and they gave us venison. Okay, right. What is venison? We didn't know. And my mother in Persian said to my father, "In Shia, what is this?" And he said, "Bokhor, just eat it." So we didn't know which animal head belonged to what we were eating, but we were so happy.
Who is the most recent immigrant in your family?
Oh, well, you know, it's funny, my sister-in-law, her sister and her husband just came here like a couple months ago. And he already has a job, which I was very impressed with, so.
That's very impressive. Tonight's event is the latest installment of a series called Let's Talk About, and the idea is to talk about a topic that we might shy away from because it's complicated or controversial or otherwise. And the theme tonight, as we've discussed, is immigration. What comes to your mind when I say the word immigration?
What comes to mind, immigrant? I think of confusion, because to be an immigrant is to be confused for a long time, and simple things just trip you up. I mean, just even sometimes going to the grocery store for us was so confusing, because we didn't know where to find certain products, and we didn't know what the products were. Because in America, you have a box and there's a picture of a whole bunch of stuff on it, and then there's like a smiling person, and like, okay, that's not in there, so you can eliminate that. But sometimes you just don't know what you're getting, and there were just so many times when we buy something thinking we bought something else, and I have to tell you a story. Somebody told me, this is not my story, but this happened to someone. He said he came to America, went to buy eggs, couldn't find them, because in other countries they don't refrigerate eggs. And he finally did. He found them, in a big egg container, and he went home, and it was pantyhose, because it was, do you remember legs?
The legs egg. Yes.
You can't make an omelet with pantyhose. So, and sometimes, a friend of mine said that when she started working in America as a recent immigrant, her American boss would often respond to her by saying, "No sweat." Which of course means no problem. She thought it meant don't sweat. So she said she was constantly going to the store and buying deodorants and soaps, and she was bathing every day. And she said one day finally the boss said no sweat, and she started to cry. And he said, "Why are you crying?" And she said, "I've tried very hard not to sweat." So there's a lot of confusing expressions in English.
There are a lot of confusing expressions in English. The English language is hard.
And it changes all the time.
It changes.
And that's the thing, you can't keep up.
It's inconsistent. I mean, when my dad, was new to the country and learning English, he, said, "Well, why is have, but rave is not rav, it's rave." So there are inconsistencies, in the language. And I read in your book that when you first came here as a second grader, you thought that your dad spoke more English than he did.
Well, my father had learned English in Iran, so from outdated British textbooks. So people don't say, "Hello, sir, how are you?" They're just like, "What's up?" So no, we were very disappointed by his actual ability to speak versus the impression he had given us. So in his mind, he was a hero, and we thought so too until we came here. That bubble burst pretty quickly. But one thing I want to say about words changing, I used to speak at Rotary clubs all the time before I joined a lecture agency, and I love Rotary clubs. And there was a gentleman in Northern California named Dick, and every year he made a list of the 10 best speakers for Rotary clubs, and he would pass these on to all the Rotary clubs in America, and this list was called Dick's Picks. And so I was recently telling the story to someone about how I was always number one on Dick's Picks. And my daughter, who's 21, said, "Mom, don't say that anymore." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "It means something else now."
It sure
Thank you,
does.
Anthony Weiner, for actually ruining that for me.
Um, I think we'll pause here. You've got a bit of humor, but you've also got the problems that language can create. And in the book, I'll very quickly refer to a problem that her mother faced. Her mother was not fluent in English, and she had problems using the language. Now, it seems on one occasion, there were a lot of silver fish in the house, and she wanted somebody to come and deal with it. So she got the number of the exterminator, and she phoned, and she said, "I have a lot of goldfish in the house." And there was a pause. And then this man said, "Oh, well, I'll be right there with my fishing tackle." And of course, she didn't understand that at all. And on another occasion, when somebody came to repair something, and he left marks on the wall. So she pointed that out, and he said, "Oh, you just need some elbow grease to get rid of those marks." So she and her daughter, and incidentally, Feroozeh, though very young, 8, 9, whatever, she was the interpreter for everyone. She spoke English fluently. So they went, and they said they wanted to buy some elbow grease. And of course, there was a lot of laughter, and they never understood what was this problem with elbow grease. How could they not buy it? They'd gone to the shop to buy some elbow grease. So this is the problem that language and the idioms that every language has creates for um, people who are foreigners and who are trying to fit in but facing problems. I just remember these two examples from the book. Okay.
What is the point, that you wanted to communicate by showing that interview? Would you please summarize it?
Okay, yeah.
Mm,
Um, what I think this interview
mm,
made very clear
mm,
is that in America,
mm.
the country Iran is seems to be unheard of, at least when,
Yes.
okay, yeah. And of course, they pronounce it Iran,
Mm.
so that's okay. So yeah, and
Do they still pronounce it Iran? Do they still? Because I know that when I was a Runa emphatically saying yes, when I was a kid, they did. They did say Iran. I know. So ridiculous I thought it was. But I thought maybe by now they might have learned. No, Americans do not learn.
yeah.
Okay,
Um,
carry on.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
actually, it all is made evident in the very first chapter
Mm-hmm.
when she joined school. She's a young girl, she's 7,
Mm-hmm.
8. And that first day, they tell her that her mother can accompany her just to make her feel
Mm.
at home, so to speak. But
Yes, comfortable. Mm.
yeah, but the teacher
Mm.
um, thought it would help, but on the contrary, the mother is uh, at a loss how to deal with this. And the teacher thinks that if she asks questions to the mother, things will be clear, whereas they're not. So she puts up a big map on the board, and she asks the mother to come up and point out where Iran is on that world map, that section that she displayed. And the mother is at a loss. She doesn't know what to do. And what um, what this little girl, she's only 7 or 8, um, understands that the mother has never really seen a map. She's not been educated in that sense, and that it was a mistake to ask the mother to point out that she would have been perhaps more qualified to do that. And the teacher is confused. And so this sort of misunderstanding comes up every now and then. I think she gave that example here of going to the mall to buy things, and they were buying all the wrong things because they couldn't um, identify what was being sold. So, in a way, they sort of blindly picked something. And as if you remember what she said there were so many pictures on the cover that it was very confusing
Impossible to say.
to
Yeah, so basically, language is the huge problem here, right?
yes,
Because they
and
cannot read what is written. They're trying to go by the pictorial or graphic,
that's
that
it.
they see.
That's
Yes.
it. And the only it's young Firuzi who is really the one who can help out. But then adults think there's no point asking a little girl and should
Hmm.
ask the mother. So again, in that first chapter, they just moved into this area, and they step out for something, and then they lost. They don't know how to get back home. Um,
Hmm.
and they just walk around in circles. And there is a lady who's watching them from her home, and she's understood that there's a problem there. Luckily, uh, the father thought that uh, they would be able to cope. Obviously, he was mistaken, but they had his phone number. So this lady comes out and says, are you lost? Can I help you? And they confess that they are. And then she shows this number, and they call, and the father explains exactly where they are staying. And this lady says, okay, I'll show you the way home. And she accompanies them to their home. And she leaves them at the doorstep. But um, Firuzi says she waits, and she thinks, is this lady wondering if they have come to the right home? And fortunately, they had a key to the house, and they managed to let themselves in. And then she is relieved that they have found the right home. So these are the little problems that the very first chapter brings up. And then as we go along, um, actually, I feel that Firuzi focuses much more on the father than on the mother, and the father's very, very high opinion of America and Americans. As a matter of fact, in that first chapter, when they finally find their home thing, I think she concludes by saying, um, so it's the Americans are very kind people. That is
Hmm.
established through this experience, and they are helpful. They've
Hmm.
been
Yeah.
receiving a lot of
I was just thinking, all immigrants would, of course, have a problem with the language unless they came from other, like English speaking places like Australia or something.
Mhm.
But I do realize that Indians have this great advantage, don't we? That pretty much all of us know a little English. We certainly can read the language,
Yeah.
which obviously Feroozeh's family couldn't. I mean, if they were guessing at what was in the cartons, you
Mhm.
know, they couldn't even read cornflakes, right? I mean, they thought the smiling mother. I mean, so Indians have a huge advantage
Mhm.
because we have, possibly because of our colonial history. But this is the one good thing that I guess that came of it. that we are clued in on a language which is an international communication link. Hmm? Yes,
Absolutely.
Runa.
See, you're quite right about Indians, of course, but
Hmm.
you have to see what kind of people go there. And in the very early days of immigration, between 60s and 70s, a whole lot of people went who knew textbook English but were not familiar with idioms.
Hmm.
They all came across the same problems actually. Uh,
Yes.
because I have my uncle and aunt who went around that time, and
Uh-huh.
they were
Uh-huh.
educated people and all that. They certainly did all their studies in English, but American idioms and English idioms of that kind
Of course,
they
a
were not
mystifying thing.
familiar
And
with. So yeah, they all came across the
Because they take
same
it
thing.
literally, yeah? They
and
read
also,
literally.
If you
I think
get
it's also,
people who are a little less exposed to the English medium in India,
Hmm.
they face a whole lot of problems,
Oh, yes.
even
and I
today.
think here it is also another thing apart from the English, it's also a culture issue that I think is more than the English.
Hugely. Of
English one
course, that is
learns. And
much
this
more.
Firuze, in a matter of months, probably she learned English, so that would not have been that much of a problem. It's the culture, and I find that their father was quite a. I mean, I don't like him too much because how can he just let two people go away on the street without them knowing the language, knowing nothing? He should have been much more supportive or helpful, or at least given some proper instructions. I feel. I mean,
Maybe they, maybe he did
I
give
never would all.
instructions, but they
Well,
couldn't follow them. And after all, they had to go out, Alka. They couldn't stay in
I know,
forever.
but at least for the first time, if I was going somewhere, I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
when I go to Australia to meet to my daughter's place, I know English, I can read, but my daughter still says, okay, this is the aisle where this
Hmm.
is the thing which I buy, this is the cereal is here, and this is there. Instead of me running around all the aisles, she at least takes me and shows me, and also next time I can come and shop on my own. I mean,
Correct.
to
There
me,
isn't
I
much of
felt
disorientation. Yeah.
yeah. So that I felt was, and what I liked, I mean, I saw seen parts of that interview earlier. What I found very interesting was that Firoza didn't intend it to be a funny book at all.
Mhm.
In fact, the first thing she talks about is that camping trip. She she put it out as a soul searing experience actually, which she said she didn't talk about at all after many years. And then when she did talk about it to her husband found it extremely funny. So, so she thinks it's something which happened to her, which was actually fairly traumatic, which at that age I'm sure it must have been. But, well, it seemed to be funny now, or she
Mhm.
made it funny now. But at that age, I'm sure it was pretty bad,
Yeah.
pretty bad.
Uh, you said something about people, educated ones like us, but most of the people going to the club, 95% of the people going to the club, are at the lower end of the thing,
On
the
the
pyramid.
spectrum, financial
Pyramid.
spectrum.
And these people, I have seen them treated very badly in the Gulf. I've seen
Mm.
them tied to each other and like
Yeah.
what you would say animals around.
Mm.
And our people that were went said that they knew English, but that was just
They did, actually.
passed it around. It was quite lousy to see all this. And I'm sorry to say that government never came to help. Nowadays, now that you see something coming around, but in earlier days, they just kept
No,
quiet.
when earlier I remember I was in TCS company, software consultancy firm, and we used to send people out in the 1970s and 80s, and that is the time when
Yeah,
people used to go out for on projects. But at that time, I remember TCS used to have an orientation sessions. Used to
and
tell people how to eat with a knife and fork,
Oh,
or
yes.
just talk about things, and don't wear a shiny blue suit, things like that,
Mm.
but,
it's
but
not
Very
wrong to do it,
necessary.
but
but you're talking about people who are educated.
that's what I'm
These
saying.
are
Even
people
those
down the
people,
line.
exactly. I'm saying even people who are educated, they also needed, sessions like this. So people who are not educated would definitely have needed much more. Yeah,
Very.
No,
Runa.
a simple thing. Uh, for Maharashtrian people speaking a little bit of English, etc., that class of people who would have been in the lower end of the rung, agreed, but still, then in the factories, etc., they were a decent opposition. Came down there. They were offered on the way some cold drinks or something like that by the hostess. They didn't take it because they said, we'll have to pay money for that. And we have got X amount of money only. So they didn't have it, even water they didn't drink, and they had no water to give
So
to.
sad. Yeah.
It was very, very sad. I'm talking about 30 years back, more,
Yeah, you're
35 years
talking
back.
about, yeah, 80s and 90s
Yeah.
even then, yes.
And you look at it there, yes, it took quite some time. Oh, but with that area, I don't know whoever else will, I don't know, will agree with me. If you acted tough and acted like a big man,
So how?
they crumbled in front of you.
Arbab? Hmm.
Anyway, so leave it to that. But what
Okay.
you're saying about people not, they didn't know what to buy, what that soap, ये
Hmm.
washing soap है कि ये है, वो
Yeah.
भी वो problem होता था. So,
Okay.
So
okay.
that's why she tells that
Right.
story about the man who was looking for eggs
Hmm.
and got pantyhose because the L was a large L followed by EGGS. So that
Legs.
L
Yeah.
for eggs. But really it was legs, which is a brand,
Pantyhose, yes,
hose,
yes.
and wrapped in little balls. So they look like eggs to him in that packing.
Mm.
When he went
Fine.
home, he was shocked to see what he had bought. And they were, making errors like that quite often because they were, and as she said, it was just pictures, 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 which could be distracting when they were trying to choose something. And also things like hot dog. They didn't want to buy that. Can't eat dog and hot dog. And so, this confusion. And turkey, she said it was so tasteless that they really didn't want to buy it, even if it was celebrated for Thanksgiving, whichever. So this, what shall I call it, inability to adapt to these differences. But I think one of the major problems she brings up quite often is the name. That she found it very difficult for people to understand her name. So she goes through that period where she decides to change her name to an American name. And she calls herself Julie because she thought that would be easier.
Hmm.
And it just
Yes,
happened.
I mean, that's like our guys also, they change their names a wee bit, tweak them so that they're easier. Chinese people, I gather,
All the time.
regularly have two
But
names,
you
one
know,
Chinese
my
name and one
my
American.
brother-in-law's name is Dhananjay.
Hmm.
So when he went to
J.
the US, they said that it's so difficult, so we'll call you D. So my brother-in-law
They'll
said
call him what?
D.
D.
Oh, D.
Okay.
The
So
letter
my brother-in-law said, fine, I'll call you Subramaniam. So he said, but my name is Peter. I said, yeah, but Peter's very difficult for me. I'm totally,
Ah,
it's an alien name, so I'll call you Subramaniam.
he,
That put him in a
he,
Stop.
sleep.
he, he is my brother.
I
Very
know
much. I
Satish
did.
has done this to an American in Muscat.
We were staying in a
Satish and
place where there were
Mohini are such
about
difficult names.
12, 13 houses around the swimming pool and garden, etc.
Six villas.
And it used to be a good place to have a swim, have your beer next to
Relax.
you, the books to they were there. So I was sitting down with my book and my beer, etc. And suddenly one fellow came and said, "Hello, how are you?" I said, "Fine, hello." Okay, and started talking about he was a brigadier in the
Air Force.
U.S. Air Force.
American Air
Yeah, brigadier in the U.S. Air Force, and I kept my beer down as soon as he came, not knowing who would it be. And he had seen it, and that's why he comes saying, I have just come now. Can I get a bottle of beer? Do you have it? Oh, okay, I got it. So I got him. Next day he came and said, Can I have another bottle of beer? And third time he came, and then he said, What's your name? More, go with the name. The name.
Satish
Uh,
and Mohini. That's very difficult. Hmm.
so I
So
called.
his name was George.
I called him George. He said,
No,
No.
his name was George. You called him Roger.
Okay, it was. I called him Roger. And, he said, no, it's George. I said, yes, it's very difficult for us to pronounce.
Yeah.
Come on, we have
Okay.
to.
Okay.
We have to hit
Right.
back,
Oh,
and
Yes. Yes,
even
Satish.
the police won't
Yes. Yes.
take it like
Yes.
that.
um,
Okay. Now,
I,
Vispi, may
yeah,
I allow Anna to say something? She's had
yes.
her hand up a long
Just going to
time.
say, Anna,
Anna.
I'd like to come back to this name thing for a minute after Anna's talk.
Absolutely. You shall. Come on, Anna.
Hi. So first of all, I must say I really enjoyed the interview. And
Hmm.
she may not have intended for her book to be funny, but she's a very funny speaker. No doubt about it. I really enjoyed it. But there's one thing I wanted to ask, a sort of an anomaly, that her mother,
Hmm.
right, grew up in the Shah's era. Shah was supposed to be very progressive from what I remember. I'm
Yes,
not
and
very
westernized.
conversant.
Hmm.
Yeah, westernized and progressive. And also, what I remember from what we studied is that the earliest cartographers were from Persia. So, why on earth did she, an educated, ought to have been educated under the Shah, had never seen a map? This is what I don't understand. Because, I mean, maps come from the Middle East first, right? As far as I remember. And if she grew up in that regime, girls were educated. Maybe I'm
Yeah.
mistaken, I suppose.
No, I think she was very young. She was 17 when she got married. So maybe
Oh,
she was educated all right, but she was educated in, I mean, she knew Persian, she knew her own language, she knew her own culture.
No.
But maybe she hadn't seen the world map. Maybe she just, in context of the world where Iran was, maybe she didn't know that.
Oh, well.
okay. Surprising because
Mm,
they were one of the originals, actually, who tried to figure out the world.
Yeah.
Anyway,
oh,
maybe
well.
she was just an inattentive student.
Anna, I wish you had been able to ask her this question. It would have been interesting. But unfortunately, we don't have her. So back again to Vispi. Yes, Vispi, please continue.
Just going back to this name problem,
Hmm.
uh, she graduated from with honors, but when she applied for a job, um, she wasn't getting any response. She says, when I just read this quickly. When I went to college, eventually went back to using my real name. From Julie, she went back to Feroozeh. All was well until I graduated, then started looking for a job. And though she had graduated with honors from the university in Berkeley, she just wouldn't get a call. And it was only when she added Julie to her name that she was being called. And then she marries this Frenchman. Hmm? So now
Yeah, so select my clothes.
she has the surname Dumas, which if Iranian names were difficult, for the Americans, a French name is equally difficult. And um, in that same chapter, she says, I just we can just read this little part. She's in a waiting room. She's come for a blood test. Every once in a while, so somebody comes up with a new permutation, and I'm once again reminded that I am an immigrant with a foreign name. I recently went to have blood drawn for a physical exam. The waiting room for blood work at our local medical clinic is in the basement of the building. And no matter how early one arrives for an appointment, 40 coughing, wheezing people have gotten there first. So these are her, I think, a way of expressing herself. Coughing, wheezing have got in first. As I waited patiently, the receptionist called out, Fritzy, Fritzy. Everyone looked around, but no one stood up. Usually, if I'm waiting to be called by someone who doesn't know me, I will respond to just about any name starting with an F. Having been called Fruzi, Fritzi, Fiorucci, and Fruz, and just plain hesitation, I am highly accommodating. I did not, however, respond to Fritzi because there is, as far as I know, no T in my name. The receptionist tried again. Fritzy, Fritzy, dumb ass. Dumas, see, dumb, dumb ass. As I stood up to the most linguistically original version of my name, I could feel all eyes upon me. The room was momentarily silent as all of these sick people sat united in a moment of gratitude for their own names. Um, so the way I think she has this flair of writing it where always there is some humor that creeps in. Um, and she says she complicated her life by not just being Iranian, but by marrying a Frenchman. So that added to the problem. And that is taken up towards the end of the book.
Okay.
Yeah, and
So, Vispi, how many more points, I mean, would you be covering now? Because it is 6:10, and I think we need to
I just,
wind
yeah,
down.
I think we can wind up. But coming to this, to the latter part of the book,
Mhm.
where they're traveling, they're in the Bahamas, and it seems everybody has the same name, surname. And so the hotel they're staying in, the manager comes to them and she says she can make out from his expression that he's going to plead for something. And that is to accept to judge a beauty contest. And she says, well, we've never done that. Uh, I'm sure there are many people in the hotel. And he says, no, no, no. The thing is, everybody knows everybody. So it has to be someone who
It
doesn't.
doesn't.
Yeah. And then what happens is there is a woman, a young woman, who is the popular choice of the people, the audience. But she and her husband decide this is not a beauty contest. They have to answer intelligently some questions. And the one who answers, gives a very cogent answer, is a dumpy looking girl with a plumper mother. And they pick on her. And there's chaos. People are shouting, how can you pick on her? But they felt, and there was a third judge. So she and her husband and a Canadian lived there. And
Mhm.
this Canadian, it seems, had no clue. So she says, he kept nodding to everything they said. And then she ends by saying, and finally, he nodded off because he'd fallen asleep. So, so there was no way he could contribute to the choice. And then they retire for the night, and she is terrified that they will come and attack them for choosing the wrong person. So in everything, there is this, a different way of
Yeah.
looking at things. So, okay,
And it's
yeah.
it's all done very light-heartedly, therefore leading to humor, right?
Mhm.
I like the lightheartedness of the whole thing
Yes,
because
definitely.
it can't all have been easy. You know, the whole process cannot have been easy.
Mhm. Yeah. And the way she's able to bring out that the humorous touches without striving for that.
Hmm.
I think it just
Hmm.
um, comes in as part of the present. And there are so many examples that you can pick from chapter to chapter. I think
So
she's,
Amy Tan, I mean, talks about the Chinese community. And
yes,
again, similar things, you know,
yeah,
similar things about the name and how they decided to name their children something that could easily be pronounced. And oh,
yeah.
lots and lots. So I think our conclusion would be that it is always interesting to read about other kind of people who are
Mhm.
different from us. And I so appreciate the, what shall I say, the lightness with which they talk about their difficulties, you know, that they have managed to bridge and come to a place where they can look back and love.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And very
Wonderful,
different
wonderful.
events she chooses
Mm.
to
Yes.
portray just that. Like the time when she decided to go camping, so it was going, and then the fact that she didn't bathe for
Mm.
15 days, came home filthy, because she was embarrassed because there were no doors to uh, the cubicles where the
Yes.
shower. Yeah, so
Oh, by the way, when my daughter went to college at Princeton, she was, almost 18, not quite. And the same thing there, huh? Same thing there. Just shop and pots of the commodes, line of commodes on one side, line of shop. Door curtains, no doors. You have to, oh God. I mean, I don't know how, but I guess if that's the culture, and young people, the younger they are, the quicker they adapt.
but
You
it
know,
is embarrassing.
yeah, you may be able to survive without bathing for 2 weeks, but you can't survive for 2 weeks doing the other jobs, right? They have to get done. I guess they get done. Okay, so Vispi, can I thank you very, very much for bringing this out of the way book to us. One which we may not have spotted, we may not have read, but thanks to you, we have heard of it and we have heard of this author too.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay, now, Afak, I see you. Would you like to say anything? Because you haven't said anything. Therefore, I
Yeah, no,
asked.
I didn't want to interrupt, but I I haven't read this book, but this is a very good recommendation. Like reading someone's experience is like a story, so I think I would find it amazing. I would read it sometime, pick it up.
Mhm. Exactly.
And
Right, right.
one
Mm.
thing that you said, I remember a quote from Charlie Chaplin that if you look at life closely, it's a tragedy, but if you sit back and look at from a distance,
I
it's a comedy. So I think that's
Very
Oh, that
true,
is,
very
you
true.
know, there is this play, The Cherry Orchard by Chekhov.
Mhm.
I read it at the age 16, thought it was a tragedy, felt very sad about Madame Ranskaya losing her estate and everything. Then, many years later, I read it during my MPhil. And then I realized that Chekhov has subtitled it The Cherry Orchard, a comedy in 4 acts. I said, what? I thought it was a tragedy. How stupid am I?
Mhm.
And then the whole thing, about looking at it closely, getting involved, getting emotionally invested in a character, then it's a tragedy.
Exactly.
But if, like Chekhov, you keep your distance, you laugh at all the little ironies and idiocies, and it's hilarious, right? So that's it. All right. Now, I don't know who Samsung SMM is, but if you'd like to reveal yourself, you can say that. Okay. Now, we also have Vinay Kripal here. And I just want to tell you that she has a book that she has written, which is being launched on the 2nd of August. It is about uh, people who have received organs and people who have donated organs. Apparently, Vinay herself is a recipient, and she has taken the trouble to meet many such people and put together a book of their experiences. So it's on the 2nd of August at Pune Club, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Okay? Please, I'm sure she'll be very happy if you can come. Okay, is there anybody? I think everyone has said something.
I want to say
Vinay? Yeah,
something.
go
Yeah.
on, Vinay. Huh.
I feel this insularity of the Americans
Hmm.
in not making a
Yeah.
single effort to understand the
Right.
other's culture is very bothersome.
Yes.
It is.
Yes.
Yes. It
Totally
is too
agree.
insular.
It is.
Totally. That's
And
what I was about to say.
they
Yeah.
haven't heard of any country practically, other than their own.
They're
No,
very, very,
possibly.
very,
But when
very.
they come to India, people go
Out
bend
of the
double
way.
over to make them comfortable.
Oh, yes. And
But
do things
here, I
their way.
mean, unless you are like them, unless you behave like them,
Hmm.
you are just ejected.
Correct.
It's a very
Also,
insular upbringing and
Very,
yeah,
very.
they're
circumstance.
only aware of
Very insular.
themselves. They're not
That's what.
made aware that they are only one country
They think they're
amongst
the
many.
center of the world. And,
Absolutely.
after the last 30, 40 years, that's how their culture and media, everything has made them think that way. They're the greatest. And some of these more intelligent types who have had a little exposure, they're saying Americans. I mean, do they know how dumb they are? In fact, there's a YouTube channels, group of people. They come up with wonderful stories of how dumb Americans are and how ignorant.
Hmm. Also, there's Little Britain. Have you heard of
Ah,
Little Britain? As against Great Britain, which is what they call
okay.
themselves,
Hmm.
Little Britain, about how dim and
Ignorant.
ignorant they
Yeah,
are.
yeah,
And
yeah.
the Brits are like that, Like my mom and dad are Vimla and Vasant.
Hmm.
And these English friends who are so, so, so close, they came and visited us many times in India afterwards. For all those years, they called them Vilma. Vimla, Vilma, because that's a known name for them. And Visant, Wasn't. What the heck? So one day I said, as an 11-year-old kid who was getting very upset, I said, their names are not that, they're this. And my mom was so upset. She didn't want them to get upset. This is how we are. We're bending over backwards, making them comfortable. But and that's Roger and George stories. Anyway,
One,
to
one,
wrap
more,
up
one more
now.
story from me now. I used to be working as an American group of companies. I was the chief of that. And big daddies from Texas had come in. Two of them had brought their wives along. The biggest boss around, he had brought a wife along. And she talked to me and etc. And turned around and told all the Americans who had come that, haven't you seen Mr. Cote talking? It's not Cote, Satish talking. The way he presents, the way he talks, you have to learn from him. Damn it. Quietly, my bosses, etc., looking at this boss's boss. And that is because they have a history behind you. You guys never had a history. I have had this lady who was in her 60s or 70s, and she was Big Daddy's better half. It happened to be that way. Only time.
Okay. Felicia, would you like to unmute and say a word? I don't think we've met you before. Is this your first time in the book club?
She's a friend of mine.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
Great. Would you like to say
Hi,
something?
Mohini. Hi.
So, thank you very, very much, Vispi. Thank you all of those people who have attended, have participated, and everyone did.